thrill and excitement of March Mania is here. And DraftKings Sportsbook, one of America's top-rated sportsbook apps, is giving new customers a shot to turn $5 into $150 instantly in bonus bets with any college basketball bet. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code JOHN, J-O-H-N. New customers can bet $5 to get $150 instantly in bonus bets only at DraftKings Sportsbook with code JOHN. The crown is yours. What is happening, everybody? The National Football League goes on and on and on. And we are about a little over 55 minutes away from round two. Obviously, the big story in the National Football League right now is when will Shedeur Sanders get drafted? We actually don't go live very much on this little old channel that is mainly just our podcast stuff. But I thought, with us going into round two, take a little. We had a long night. Went for a couple hours with Coward. If you missed that, that's up. I did like 20 minutes just kind of recapping some of my other thoughts after I got off with Colin. And I basically didn't go to bed last night till I looked at the clock. It was like 12:30. I watched a lot of GM coach press conferences last night, watched a few this week, or excuse me, today on guys getting introduced. I saw Cam Ward with Borgazzi. I saw the Eagles who welcomed the Alabama linebacker that Howie was really, really excited to get. The best part, one of my favorite parts about the draft is especially the first round. Like we all acknowledge and are cool with missing on third round picks or fourth round picks or even second round picks. But there is a lot of pressure on the first round pick. Having gone to practices over the years for countless teams, obviously when the preseason starts, everyone is keeping an eye of like that was their first round pick. And it's just something that as a player stays with you for good or bad. And like I've mentioned this forever, where you get drafted does not determine your success. It doesn't. Honestly, it has no bearing on whether you're going to be good or not. That's on you. It's on you to produce in the NFL. And now we've actually never had a shorter leash for guys. Now, what it does do is it gives you more opportunities, right? Daniel Jones is a good example of that, right? He just got $15 million. Like, I don't even think he's a good player, but he was a top 10 pick. He's shown signs of life. Like, I think Anthony Richardson's terrible. He will for sure get another chance. I mean, Trey Lance couldn't win a backup job in Dallas, and somehow Joe Ortiz and Jim Harbaugh, who clearly know what they're doing, gave him, I think, like $1.5 million guaranteed. If he had been a fifth round pick, that would not have happened. So you're not necessarily on scholarship, but you get extra opportunities financially. But that doesn't mean you get to play, and it doesn't mean that your career goes well because you got to produce. So all these guys are going to have to get the job done. And it's why Colin and I talked about this. Van Pelt went on this recent rant. It's so true about grades. Like Sunday, a big article for ESPN.com, I'm sure now for The Athletic, is like giving every team a grade. It's like C plus, B minus. It's like no one fucking knows. I mean, the Baltimore Ravens, one of the best organizations in all of sports over the last 25, 30 years, passed on Lamar Jackson in the first round. Like, yeah, they drafted him, but they also took Hayden Hurst before. No one has any clue. Not a soul. So I think that this is fun. I really enjoy it. There are players that I really like. I love, like, I think the Falcons are a joke organization. I really do. the Jalen Walker is one of my favorite players in recent memory. That guy is like can't miss, gonna be a stud. And so it's like I like that pick, and then they had to go back and make one of the craziest trades. I do want to start off just because I've the last 24 hours thought a lot about, and if we're able to throw up the James Gladstone, who's like this young, bright whippersnapper who somehow thinks, and listen, maybe I'm old, I'm 40, out of the loop. And I sometimes I try to be hip and cool, and you wear that sweatshirt with a sports coat. Uh, Andrew Whitworth on Amazon, like he's pulled off that look for a while. Granted, he played in the NFL for like 15 plus years. Good looking bald guy, enormous, could probably pull off any look. Gladstone is also rocking that kind of now. This isn't a $30 hoodie. I'm sure it's 500 plus dollars in a sports coat. But today, I love Travis Hunter. Everyone likes Travis Hunter. No one that watches football, that follows football, thinks Travis Hunter is not a big time NFL prospect. He was a lock to go high in any draft. This was a shitty draft, and he went too. But he's a top 10 pick in the best draft of all time. In a draft where his coach, Deion Sanders, I think in that draft was like Barry Sanders, Deion Sanders, was it Bruce Smith? I forget. It was Troy Aikman. It was stupid. It was like all 4 or 5 guys were Hall of Famers. So like he's a top 10 pick in that draft. But I do need to play this because I'm on so many text chains with buddies that work for teams and that are college directors, that are assistant GMs, that are area scouts. And these guys, listen, I don't act like I'm anybody special when it comes to the NFL, but most of my friends, because I started in Philadelphia, a lot of friends that work for the Eagles, a lot of friends that work for the Chiefs, like these guys got rings. Like they have, some of them have multiple rings. Honestly, I have a buddy that has 4. He worked for the Eagles with Doug, and then he went to the Chiefs, and he's won 3. He had a chance to, get his fifth win or fifth ring uh, a couple months ago, but I think it's kind of a running joke. The press conference that Gladstone gave that I do want to play if we can the video of him talking about Travis Hunter.
Yeah, as we sit here, Travis Hunter is a Jacksonville Jaguar, and really what comes to mind for me, right? Thinking about the sport of football and really the power of the game itself, right? Its capacity to ignite belief, right? Belief in ourselves, belief in others, right? Belief in achieving what many may deem impossible. Travis Hunter, he embodies belief, right? He's a rare person, he's a rare player, but he's also a reminder that the boundaries of the game of football were built to be challenged. And so the decision to select him was actually a statement for how we plan to move, who we are, and we want him to be nothing more than him. Because when he is, he elevates the space around him. From the football field to the city to the game of football itself, Travis Hunter is who we've been hunting up. Couldn't be more jacked to be sitting right here beside him and introduce you all to the man of the hour.
Well, there's no arguing that my man's intelligent. He's got some of those key buzzwords that you'd probably find in like a Uber investment meeting or like a Facebook town hall led by Zuckerberg and his cronies. But this is football. This isn't as complicated as he's making it sound. And I'm going to stand by this. I am pro being aggressive in any walk of life. And when the Rams forever pounded the table for F them picks, like it worked. And it was something, not all their big trades worked, but for the most part, they ended up with Stafford and guys like Jalen Ramsey, and they won a Super Bowl. But in football, this is not basketball, where if I have a couple great players, it doesn't matter really who my coach is. I'm going to be really, really competitive. Like I could coach Giannis or Jokic. Doesn't mean I'm going to win the NBA championship, but my team's not going to suck. It's basically impossible. In football, we see all the time talented teams suck. and average teams overachieve because of the power of coaching and specifically schemes. And on offense, even more than defense. Like defense is a combination of X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes. Like you can only be so good on defense if you don't have high end players. Like I can be the greatest schemer of all time. If I have my corners run as fast as me, we're not going to cover a soul. I can know nothing about defense. If I have Darrell Revis and Deion Sanders and Bruce Smith and Lawrence Taylor, like my defense is going to be pretty good. But on offense, like I can outthink you, I can out scheme you. And the Rams have really benefited, regardless of all the moves they've made. They have one of the brightest young coaches we've ever seen in any sport in Sean McVay. And they won a Super Bowl when they upgraded dramatically at quarterback in Matt Stafford. So, like, their offense or their organizational philosophies of being aggressive really benefited from having a $15-20 million coach and a quarterback who, for a long time wasted away in Detroit. And we've seen him on a good team. The guy's a star. And there's a reason he's going to go down when he retires as one of the highest paid guys in the history of the league. But Gladstone said something last night, and he said, anytime that we get the opportunity to be bold, we are not going to flinch. And that's just like he just said in that press conference, sounds really good. And it'd be awesome in front of a bunch of like venture investors. I bet when he sat down and interviewed with the cons, they're blown away by how sharp this dude is. And he's got all the vocabulary words. But when you're bold in the NFL and you make a trade like this, going up a couple spots and trading a future first round pick when you do not know your team at all, you've never coached this team, that being Liam Cohen, and as a GM, you've never been around your guys at practice. Why? Because you haven't had any. I think it's borderline insanity what they did. It's one thing, like, we'll get into the Atlanta Falcons. I think what they did is nuts too. But at least you would say, well, Fontenot has been around this team for 4 or 5 years now, right? He was the GM with Arthur Smith. And even Raheem Morris, now a year in, has coached his team for a year. So whether they're right or wrong, they know the strengths and weaknesses of their individual players, of their individual units, of both sides of the ball, of what they lack, of what they have. Like they know that very well. They were around their guys, even Raheem and his coaching staff now for 8, 9+ months. These guys cannot say that. The other thing is, and I'm sorry, like we do judge younger people when they've never proven anything and they have these like sexy sayings. It's like, are we sure this is not going to be an all-time embarrassment? And the thing is, like the Ravens and the Eagles and the Chiefs, like they don't really talk like that. They don't really act like that. And then you watch the Jags, who, for basically, I look today, for essentially the last 20 years, have averaged like 5 or 6 wins a year. I mean, this is not only one of the worst organizations in football, you could argue it's one of the most irrelevant organizations in professional sports. If they disappeared tomorrow, I don't think anyone would notice. So this is a team, people have been saying like Shedeur, people are rooting against Dion. Like, you guys are overthinking this. If people thought he could play, he'd be on a team, right? But people are rooting against this guy now. I promise you that. Not Travis Hunter. Like everyone's in agreement. Travis Hunter's sweet. Travis Hunter, I'd want him on my team. You'd want him on your team. Like, guy's a badass. I mean, I think honestly we're probably underselling how awesome his last season was. But to make a move like this, like when are you one player away? You have no clue. Nobody knows. Based on what we've seen in recent years, definitely not. You're several players away. Is just crazy. But then to back it up with words like that seems like, come on, guys. I did want to dive into the Falcons, and if we could, I think we got a tweet to show the exact value of people making fun of him, kind of like Nico Harrison. I wouldn't go that far. I mean, the Falcons aren't exactly Luka trade here, but listen, I'm not here to shit on kids or guys or whatever, but the facts are the facts. So when you hear that like he was not on draft boards, like I'm not making that up, right? I text people in the league and they go, yeah, he was off a lot of draft boards. He was off our draft board. We would not have taken him. Like that, no one's making that up. And you know, James Pierce was a pretty big red flag for teams. Not like he's been in prison or anything, but there are character red flags and people that are red flags in this draft. And this is what's so laughable about Shedeur. Everyone's like, "Oh my God, just because he's cocky and arrogant." Guess what? A ton of red flag guys were drafted yesterday in the first round. Why? Because teams think they can play. you know, and the Falcons traded up 20 spots from 46 to 26 and gave up a future first rounder for a guy that was not on draft boards. I think that's crazy. Like, what are we doing? And this is the thing. It's the same the Jags always lose. The Falcons subtract Matt Ryan, don't win. Everyone's like, they're gonna go to the playoffs. That's all I heard last year. Is like, they're going to the playoffs. No, they're not. Now, like I said last night, I picked the Saints. I was wrong. Turned out to be the Bucks. But anytime that the Falcons, the hype on this franchise, man, is just crazy. Now I get it. And I'm not against the philosophy too. Their pass rush has been really bad. So you get Walker, who's from what I've heard, his character, like best character guy in the draft, Jalen Walker, was one of my favorite players in the draft. But then double down with Pierce, and maybe they think to get him around Walker, that could help. It's a little bit like, well, they drafted Jalen Carter, but they had guys like Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean and Nolan Smith surround them with that core, kind of lift them up. I totally understand that logic. But to trade a first round pick to do that, I watched the press conference last night with Les and Sean. Sean was trying not to laugh being asked about these trades. Was trying to like keep a smirk on his face and just kind of keep it professional. And I think a big reason is Raheem Morris is one of his best friends. But to agree to that, they knew they were fleecing him, especially for the player in which they got. And I haven't seen this anywhere, but I do believe like this had to be unprecedented. A team to trade from the second round into the first round in the 20s for a non-quarterback. I don't think we've ever seen a team give a first-round pick, at least in the internet age, since I've been following, watching, and doing this for a living. So some of these trades, it's like there's a big difference between being aggressive and taking big swings in life and being reckless, right? And I think some of these trades feel reckless. And I think the Falcons feel reckless. Look at Tampa. They've won the division or been to the playoffs for what, the last 4 straight years? I guess they've won the division, right? Because they won it last year. They won it the previous year. I guess 3 years ago, it would have been Brady. Maybe they were a wild card, one of Brady's year. It might have been both their years. Because I think the Super Bowl year, did they beat the Saints on the road? But definitely under Baker Mayfield, that they've had home playoff games in the first round. And who do they draft in the first round? Because they could have used a defensive player. They could have taken a red flag a guy. They have a million high character, buttoned up, non fuck around squad. I told Colin this last night. The Bucks remind me a little bit of the Patriots in the 2000s, like the Vrabel, Brewski, Rodney Harrison, kind of that crew. And they take Ibuka from Ohio State, who, like Jalen Walker, was one of the cleanest prospects in the draft. Not the best player, but just in terms of on and off the field, like was loved by everybody. I say this all the time. Some people, your favorite player in the draft, you'll talk to a GM and it'll be like Jalen Walker's my favorite player in the draft. Doesn't mean he thinks he's the best player in the draft. But when you factor in what he stood for in college, how good he was in college, the way that program discusses him and talks about him, and just the attributes he brings to the table, like his size, I think he gets looked down upon because people think he's smaller, like he's basically 6'2", whatever, 245, 250. He's not that different in terms of measurables from Abdul Carter. And everyone acted like Abdul Carter is the next Micah Parsons and Jalen Walker is just not big enough. And I think sometimes it's crazy the momentum and how a narrative can grow and everyone just kind of agrees with it. That's why you bring that shit into a draft room. You better have facts to back it up or you will get destroyed. It's why I think it's laughable when I do think historically let's go like the 90s, like when I was a kid. There were two or three media outlets. So like what Mel Kiper said, and I'm not anti Mel Kiper, what someone wrote in a newspaper really mattered. In 2025, there are a million shows. Hell, I benefit from one. I make my living off being a podcaster. But there are a lot of YouTubers, podcasters, television hosts, writers for The Athletic. It's completely spread out. So people have these opinions and say these things, and I'm guilty of this too. And people act, and because you follow someone, you think that is gospel. You think that's a fact. This guy is going to get drafted in the top 10. This guy, never heard of this guy. Who can that be? And in 2025, like these teams, I do think way back in the day that could influence an owner or even a GM. Nowadays, I think that's a little more difficult. There are a million mock drafts. 10 years ago, there used to be like three or four. I bet I could Google right now 25. And I'm not just talking like random people putting it out. I'm talking like legitimate outlets. But there are a million outlets now. And when you see like, well, he was, because I saw a lot of this with Shedeur Sanders, who, again, I'm a fan of. I think he's a good player. But like he was projected to go by who? NFL Live? People on Get Up? Like, unless you have the draft boards of the teams, we have no clue who's projected to go where. Like, it's all a complete educated guess. And it's an entertainment element by that's all we're all in now. That's what Mel Kiper, he's in the entertainment business. So yeah, he makes his projections, what he thinks, but that's if that's not what the Giants think. I heard forever and I fell for it. Because whenever you hear something enough, you start to believe it. How I use this example all the time. How often that you experience this in your life? Do you know a couple people and they tell you about a person like this guy's a loser, this guy's a douchebag. This guy never do business with this guy. Especially those of you that have lived in the same community for a while. There might be three or four people in that community, especially if you're in specific business, maybe real estate, maybe a restaurant business, whatever. Stay away from this guy. This guy's a bad guy. This guy's an asshole. And then you meet that person, you're like, God, I kind of liked him. Because in my interaction with the person, it was like, went really well. He was really nice to my kid. He was awesome. He was cool with my wife. His wife was really cool. We had a good conversation. We had a couple cocktails, and it was enjoyable. And vice versa. You hear good things about a person, you meet him, you're like, God, that was kind of a loser. Stay away from that guy. But sometimes you hear something enough, you start to believe it in your head. I thought it too. Like Mike Tomlin. What's Mike Tomlin? He's going to take Shedeur Sanders. Love Shedeur Sanders. They do not have a second round pick because they not as bad as the Falcons and the Jags, but them trading for DK Metcalf when they don't have a quarterback, who's a very quarterback specific type player. Like DK Metcalf is a type player that he needs a certain type quarterback. You don't have a big arm, don't throw a good deep ball. Like he's not going to be as useful for your team. And it came and they took a defensive tackle. Now, from a football standpoint, why would they take a defensive tackle? Well, sneaky, their defense down the stretch sucked. Cam Hayward, friend of the show, was on a couple years ago. Love that guy. Getting older. Might not have that much more football left. From a football standpoint, kind of makes some sense. But no one would argue, would you rather have a quarterback when you don't have a quarterback or grab a defensive tackle? Every single human would be like, take quarterback. And they were given the opportunity. And anyone watching or listening to this knows that follows the Steelers, because I get pushback on this all the time, like Middlekauff, you undersell how powerful Tomlin is in the draft room. If he wants something, he gets it. Well, clearly he didn't want Shedeur Sanders. I mean, so on their projections, Mel Kiper's projections had him, and I wasn't watching ESPN. I was watching NFL Network because Daniel Jeremiah, and I didn't hear Mel doing this, but I guess after Cam Ward was drafted last night, he goes on some rant about Shedeur. And I do agree with people going like, that's kind of a sweet moment for Cam Ward and his family, and you're just talking about someone else. And the reality is, and this is what I get back to, like this is entertainment. This isn't journalism died a long time ago. Doesn't really exist anymore, right? In terms of television and definitely when it comes to talk radio or podcasting, like those days are dead when it comes to talking about football or basketball. This is all entertainment. And once you acknowledge that and accept it, it's easier to understand like how much bullshit is out there. And I'm not against the bullshit. Like that's the bullshit exists because the consumer wants it. But everyone now reacting, and I saw who was it? Marcus Spears kind of had a good little rant. Like we need to pump the brakes a little bit. People did, and I say this all the time. If you go in the second round, if you're drafted 50th or 38th or 44th, that's not a travesty. That is an incredible accomplishment. You were one of the 50 best players in your class to go to the NFL. And it's not quite a first round pick, but if you're a second round pick, you're getting some leeway as well. Like you're going to be around forever. Like you're definitely not getting cut for a couple years unless you do something awful off the field. We act like you're just some complete scrub. You're just a loser. When I was with the Eagles, our two best players, Deshaun Jackson, Shady McCoy, were second round picks. Great players all over the league. DK Metcalf just signed a $150 million contract. Google where he was drafted. A.J. Brown, one of the best players in the league at his position. Might want to Google where he was drafted. The second round is a position that coaches and specifically GMs have like wet dreams about during the draft process because they know that's where you get sweet players and you actually get them for a little cheaper. Even McVay said when they traded back, I think the Browns said this too, or maybe it was Andrew Berry, is we thought the sweet spot in this draft is like all the good players. We wanted to be like why we were cool with making the trade is we love the 30s because we think there are gonna be a lot of starters there, and you don't have to pay first round wages. But I just think sometimes that these things can like snowball and become a story when it's not that way in reality at all. And I think one problem in sports and obviously politics is like people think that anything on television or anything said is like so factual. Like if you just look at it through the lens of like this is all entertainment, whether that's healthy or not, whether that's right or wrong, I don't know, but that's the fucking reality. Like this is all just entertainment. Now it's not for the teams. Like they're just trying to draft the best player. Clearly, for whatever reason, unless I don't know anyone with the Giants. I would imagine Brian Daboll does not like me over what I said a couple years ago when the Wink Martindale stuff happened. And I got word back that they were not happy about what I had said in the organization, and he was pissed. And listen, he's fine to be pissed. What I said was factual, but so it's not like he's feeding me this information. It's just going off what people said that they'd talked to him. Like I've seen multiple McShay, Albert Breer. The Giants weren't high on Shedeur Sanders. They like Jackson Dart more. Whether they're right or wrong, who knows? We won't know for a couple years. I think Shedeur Sanders is a better player than Jackson Dart, but I'm not running the team. They are, and they chose. We saw Mike Tomlin get an opportunity. He said no. He said, nope, let's take a defensive tackle. And yeah, I think we got to just pump the brakes a little bit on the hysteria. It's fucking laughable. Other than that, one thing that is abundantly clear is could we get the tweet on how many guys that were drafted from the Big Ten and the SEC? Because there's a big discrepancy going on right now in terms of the talent in college football. So if we could just throw that up, if that's possible. Because I have a theory of where we're headed, and it's clearly inevitable that I miss the Pac 12. It sucks it doesn't exist. I'm not going to act like it's normal watching Arizona play Oregon in the NCAA tournament and it's a Big Ten versus Big 12 basketball game. Like, I think that's stupid. But it is what it is. We're not only never going back, I think the Big 12 and the ACC are in trouble moving forward. And they are going to get similar treatment as the Pac 12 because last night, the Big Ten and the SEC had 26 of the 32 guys drafted. And let's face it, if Travis Hunter hadn't known Dion since he was a little kid, one, he was supposed to go to Florida State. And two, Can you imagine the teams that would have been willing to buy him if he would have been willing to like be a transfer portal type guy? Ashton Genty was drafted from the Mountain West. His own coach went on record and said, like, we got very lucky. The most we could pay him was $300,000. He had seven-figure offers that he turned down. Most times, Ashton Genty in that situation, if he's at Boise State, if he's at Fresno State, if he's at Washington State, he's going to a bigger program. And it's pretty clear now that the Big Ten and the SEC, and I hear this a lot, there's only so many good teams in the Big Ten. Well, yeah, no one cares about the mid to lower tier. But the big ones, a little like the NFL, like do the Jags matter? Do the Dolphins matter? Do the Arizona Cardinals matter? Of course not. But they're in the group and they're in the fraternity. Like they're part of the partnership. And yeah, does Iowa and Wisconsin make the Big Ten? Of course not. But they're in. And they're kind of on scholarship. And now that they added Oregon, now that they added SC, and SC is going to start buying people because they got unlimited money, and obviously the SEC is willing to pay whatever, that it's clearly, obvious where we're headed. That we're going to go to an AFC NFC model, and it's going to be the Big Ten and the SEC. And the Big Ten and the SEC are going to continue to gobble up the lucrative and important football programs. Facebook does. That's what Apple. That's what all these companies do. Well, football's no different, right? The NFL is untouchable, so they don't really have to worry about that. But college football has been fragmented, which was cool, which I was all for. The regionality of the sport, uh, it added to the intrigue of everything. If you were someone from California and Cal, Stanford, SC, UCLA meant a lot to us. If you're from Mississippi, Mississippi, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State, and Bama and LSU, like you took pride in those programs. I think we're coming down the home stretch, man, of that kind of getting thrown out the window. And I would imagine the SEC will have from Clemson to Miami to North Carolina to I don't know all the teams that they will add, but they're going to add. And when you look at the Big Ten, like obviously Notre Dame is an easy fit from the Stanfords to the whoever they want to add. But I would bet against the Big 12 and the ACC from a football standpoint. I'm not talking basketball because basketball is a little different. But from a football standpoint, I don't think it will exist in 5 to 10 years. And the power in which you saw last night, it's only going to get worse because they could buy all the players. And even when we go into the revenue sharing agreement, where it's like, the SEC has, which I think is kind of stupid that they even, let's say it's $21 million dollars and football gets 75% of that. It's like, wait, if I have to share with anyone else beside men's basketball, I would have a problem. But I've been saying this for a while, Title IX, the legalities of it. Like, you got to give softball and men's soccer and like women's soccer, like they're volleyball, they're going to get some money. It's why inevitably football will just break off. If you're really just factoring in the money element of where this is all going, like it's pretty easy to see the future. I don't know exactly how we're going to get there, but like you get to a point where it's like, I'm not sharing my money with anybody. We generate it all. And I think the more and more that the SEC and the Big Ten start making 75, 80, 90, $100 million a year from television networks just for football, it will only incentivize them to just continue to consolidate it all and keep it all to themselves. It's why last year when the arguments came about the playoffs, about letting certain teams in. I mean, the only reason that Boise State got in and a non-power four team has an automatic invite is so they didn't get sued. The argument last year about SMU, it's like, what? The SEC and the Big Ten, they don't want to have these arguments. Right now, they have to have them for, legal reasons. But I continue to believe that they will break off from that and that won't even be an option. And they won't even play in the same sandbox as Boise State. And teams like Boise State and Fresno State and Washington State, it's going to basically be D1 AA in Division 2. And it sucks. It's sad. but I think it's only going to get worse. And so when you get an Ashton Genty, even a program like Colorado, like, is Deion Sanders going to be there in a couple years? If I was a betting man, especially now that his kids don't play for him anymore, I'd say Deion Sanders over under years at Colorado. I'd put it at 1.5. Um, maybe you take the over and he goes two, but I have a hard time. And listen, I know he's saying all the right things, but you're telling me like when Florida or Florida State or one of these LSU, that I just think that it's an easy one. And from a buzz standpoint, from a recruiting standpoint, it feels inevitable. And he's no dummy. And some of these programs, even in the Big 12 and the ACC, will not have a seat at the table. And you can say if it's unfair, like why Rutgers and Mississippi State and some of these programs have a seat at the table in their conference. Well, yeah, and we could make that argument, but they're already in. And I think the numbers this year of the players drafted, especially in the top three rounds, and we argue this so often when it comes to college football in the fall. It's like this is why we make these arguments because the talent discrepancy in these conferences is so big. Now, some guys like Travis Hunter, he would have started both ways at Alabama. He could have started both ways at Ohio State. But uh, sorry, I lost my train of thought. But some of these guys, it's why I think it's been fair to ask the questions about Ashton Genty. Like, what would he look like as a starting running back for LSU? I don't know. What would he look like as a starting running back for Wisconsin? I don't know. I think it probably would have been pretty good, right? But we don't know for a fact. And listen, I watched Pete Carroll last night in Spy Tech, who obviously are really good. Like, I know I have a lot of friends that have worked with John Spytek. I know him a little bit. He clearly is really, really good at his job. He's really smart. I would bet on Spytek being a really good GM. And Pete Carroll was asked about it last night. You go back to Pete Carroll's history, starting at USC, like he knows running backs. Any coach in the league could have traded for Marshawn Lynch out of Buffalo. He had the balls to do it. From Kenneth Walker to Reggie Bush to they've had a lot of sweet running backs on Pete Carroll's watch over the last 20 plus years. And he talked about last night his body and balance control when he's getting tackled, his speed, and everything he said is true. But it's also against players like who's he playing against? And people, I'm going to come off like an Ashton Genty hater. I'm just asking the questions that no one is asking. Because breaking tackles against Ohio State or Alabama is a little different than San Diego State. It just is. And it's the hard part about the draft. And maybe he'll just go to the NFL and be awesome. And it could happen. Or maybe it'll be tough. I don't know. I'm fascinated to watch. Clearly, people that know what they're doing drafted him. So it's like I put stock into that. And fascinated to watch. I think we have a couple super chat questions that we got asked. You throw it up on the screen, or you probably I don't know if I'll be able to see it. If you could throw it in the chat. Yeah, throw it. Just throw it in the chat, and I'll read it. So, what a day! It's one thing. It's hard after the draft is to kind of relax and go to bed. I just laid there and like looked at the wall, just couldn't sleep. Okay, with the Miami Dolphins draft, is it irresponsible? No, with the Miami Dolphins draft, irresponsibility in the past few years, would it be pro? Basically, the question is, should the Miami Dolphins draft Shedeur Sanders today? Uh, I think once you pay Tua Tagovailoa that much money, you're just kind of in bed with him for at least a couple years. And the Mike McDaniel experience of Tua and adding Zach Wilson, which I don't know about that. I told Coward last night. I think Miami's in major major trouble. If I was a betting man right now, I would expect them to be pretty bad. My guess is the Miami Dolphins are in the mix for a top five draft pick in 2026. 26, and they're a Tua concussion away from being the worst team in the league. Thoughts on the Colts draft so far and where they might go next? Dad loves the Colts and has been heartbroken since Luck left. Well, I think they were clearly going to go with a skill player, and the wide receiver draft, uh, I think very much in the eye of the beholder. Once Loveland had gone to the Bears, I think Warren he coached Dallas Goedert when he was the OC of Philadelphia. Warren is a little bit more scheme dependent than some of these tight ends. He's not exactly, I would say, the twitchiest athlete. You watch Warren, and listen, I'm pro Warren. He's a little like McMillan of tight ends in the sense of he can be covered, he can make contested catches, he's got great ball skills. He's so big that you just throw it up, he's going to win, almost like throwing an alley oop to Shaq. But I do get nervous with those type players. How they work in the NFL, just in terms of like I'm not faster than anybody, and it's not like I'm the some elite route runner getting open nonstop. But I think you just kind of throw jump balls, and I you have an inaccurate quarterback, so a taller guy, in theory, should make it a little bit easier. Is it finally the Lions' year? I asked a buddy in the league today what he thought was the craziest pick, and he thought the Lions drafting the defensive tackle from Ohio State. I'll be honest, I don't know that much about that guy. Uh, he thought that was a little bit of a stretch. I do defend teams when you are drafting at the end of the first round. It's not easy. Sometimes you got to take some flyers. I mean, Andy Reid took a guy that had some flags next to his name for a lot of teams, but it's like I'm drafting 32. What am I supposed to do? Draft some overachieving lack of talent guy? No, I'm taking a big swing. And I think the Lions defensive tackle. I mean, last year they had so many injuries, and remember they were signing guys off the street. They were like putting Jamal Adams on the line of scrimmage. So I think that kind of can scar you. And I'm a big believer in Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes. It's hard for me to say about that pick. Luckily, their team, when healthy, is I would say easily one of the best in the league. Bengals just picked someone with 1.5 sacks last season. Can you help me understand why my team scouting department is still by far the smallest of all 32 teams? Well, I would say this about the Bengals. They have historically taken some flyers on guys, from Pac Man, Devontae, but they've also hit on a lot of those guys. And I've always been of the philosophy when it comes to pass rushers, I struggle with super talented, like checks all the boxes, the measurables, and that's what the A&M pass rusher does. Like from an athletic standpoint, he's a freak, but production standpoint, he's not any good. And I was taught by a wise old man, Jim Washburn, that like you either sack the quarterback or you don't. Like you either impact and touch the quarterback or you don't. It's kind of like an innate skill. It's like Howard Mudd, RIP, taught me also that if you ever go, well, I'm going to draft this guard. He's not that strong now. I'm going to get him a lot stronger in the NFL. He's like that. You don't just add strength, right? At 22, you're not. You might be weight room stronger at 27, but in terms of your power, how often do you see a guy in college lack power, and then by the time like his third or fourth year in the NFL, it's like this guy's like Larry Allen. Never happens. It has happened where you get guys that aren't that productive in college as a pass rusher turn into more productive pass rushers in the pros. But I would say that's more of an outlier than a consistent theme. But they like height, weight, speed guys. And they have a long history. Like part of the reason the Bengals, with a small scouting staff and probably typically one of the lower paid coaching staffs in the league, have been pretty good, right? I think the Bengals, when people make fun of them, and I would say this if I was Mike Brown, like, can you guys, people act like we're like the Jags or the Dolphins or the Cardinals or one of these shitty franchises. Like you can make fun of us for being frugal when it comes to breaking guys off. Definitely from a coaching standpoint and a front office standpoint, but in terms of check how often we go to the playoffs because a lot of these other teams would die to go to the playoffs as often. How many times have we been in the playoffs in the last 15 years? Look at the Jets and the Giants. Let's compare those numbers, and they'd be right. So I think sometimes we are unfair to the Bengals. They've been pretty good over the years. Love Colin's take on football. Curious if you could choose this season's team to be featured on Hard Knocks, which team would you like to watch? I'm probably a noted Hard Knocks hater just because I think it's kind of lost its luster over the years. And then the off-season Hard Knocks happened with Joe Shane. It's like, this is the best thing I've ever seen in my life. And then once that happened, every team in the league was like, no Hard Knocks ever in the offseason after everyone's been making fun of Joe Shane. It kind of wrote me back in, but then the Hard Knocks in training camps really I just don't find it that enjoyable. I think it's just so cheesy. It used to be so raw and real. It was really ahead of its time. It's like if you go back, anyone that watched reality shows in the early to mid 2000s, they definitely felt a little more unscripted, a little more spontaneous, and just like anything could happen. My wife watches so much reality television show on Bravo now. It's basically just a scripted television show. And I think that's what Hard Knocks has become. If you're not giving me and I understand why teams don't give access, but like the way they talk about the players in the staff meetings, th- when Hard Knocks first happened, and for the first 10 years, it felt like you were getting that. Going around the table, talking about this guy sucks and this guy blows and get rid. Like that's how people talk. That's the sport. That's the business up that these guys are in. But we don't get that anymore. And now we get like these puff pieces of this undrafted free agent and his new wife and their young baby. And it's like, that's kind of entertaining, but I'm just kind of out on Hard Knocks. Joe Shane tried to rope me back in, and that was awesome. That was a throwback. It was almost too good. It really was too good. And then the entire league said, "Nope, no mas, don't even try." So I really, I guess that's a long-winded way of saying I don't give a shit. I don't know who Landon Jackson is, to be honest with you. I do think historically this little stretch of real estate, like pick 33 to like early 40s, you get a lot of sweet players here. You get a lot of starters here. I mean, this is where Nick Chubb went. This is Debo Samuel went here. Derek Carr went here. Like you get high end starters, guys, quarterbacks. Uh, if Shedeur goes right here, he could easily. That's the other thing. It's like, oh my God, he fell to the second round. He could be a starter week one, getting drafted here. Any insight as to why the Eagles drafted Danny Watkins since you were involved in the process? He was good in college. He was at Baylor. Uh, he was just a good player, and he turns out even less about the age because he was older. I think a maturity standpoint, he was 26, but in like a 14-year-old's body. He was extremely immature, and obviously from a physical standpoint, he played left tackle in college and moved him to guard. I think he reminded a lot of people of Logan Mankins. The difference is Logan Mankins is like a country farmer badass. Danny Watkins is like kind of a, I don't know, immature weirdo and got exposed really quick. And this is, the type thing that I think it would be harder 15 years later for probably Danny to get uh, by maybe some of the background information. But I also think it's always easy to play that game after the fact, right? And we do it with every draft. Like, oh, we should have known this. Oh, this big red flag there. Oh, shouldn't have done this. And I'm guilty of this too. But I think we do that a lot. That we look back in a year or two I said this last night to Colin. Will Campbell is clearly a pretty impressive guy. I was a fan of his when they were getting ready to play USC and Lincoln Riley wanted out of the game. And he said, "We're not going to Vegas for the casinos. We're going there for a street fight." Now, obviously, LSU lost the game, but I remember that quote. I'm like, I fucking like this guy. And last night he's crying. He said he would die for Drake May. I remember when the 49ers had the they had the second overall pick and they traded a three with the Bears who drafted Trubisky in the draft with Mahomes. But they took Solomon Thomas. And Solomon Thomas is going to play in the NFL for a long time. Like Solomon Thomas is a good player. Like you would want him on your team. He's a rotational defensive tackle, good against the run. But his character and off the field, he's elite. I mean, he's like, you'd want him to marry your daughter. His character is just, it's pristine. It's a 10 out of 10. And I think sometimes you can overvalue that and you can like that player more than some other guys with more traits. And sometimes it works out. And I think Will Campbell off the field is everything you want. I saw a clip today. Albert Breer was saying that Will Campbell was blowing people away in these visits and these interviews, separate from the Patriots, who obviously loved him. But like, it's people get really impressive. But football, like that stuff matters. But we're gonna find out like the arm length thing, and just I watched him at times last year. He's a good player, but is he like the fourth overall player in the draft? Now, I think we could also get back to, and then if you wanted to counter me on Ashton Genty, it's like Middlekauff. This draft was ass. There might not have been a player, Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter, in a good draft are probably going, even last year, like is Travis Hunter going above Marvin Harrison Jr.? Again, because the way the Jags talked about him was a little more receiver than DB, but to me, you would definitely take Malik Neighbors over him. I would probably take Travis Hunter over Marvin Harrison Jr., but I feel like some NFL people, and specifically Arizona last year, really valued Marvin Harrison. He was like this plug and play pro, which I think is a little debatable. We'll see how that goes. You take him over Rome, but Abdul Carter, some years, like I don't know where he would stack in recent memory with some of these pass rushers. I like Abdul Carter. I mean, he's a big time pass rusher, but depending on the draft, he's not a top five lock. And then depending on how many quarterbacks you have, that would push guys down. So my point is that if the draft with star players kind of sucks, that like, yeah, just take whoever. And that was kind of the mindset for a lot of these teams, unless you could trade back. And the Rams and the Browns were like, it's pretty crazy that the Browns, who are going to need a lot and are so fucked because of this Deshaun Watson contract, not only went from 2 to 5, but acquired another second round pick and next year's first round pick. That's pretty wild. And I swear to God, if the Falcons suck and the Rams end up with a top 10 pick after draft, it's one thing like the Browns earn that. They have the second overall pick. So anytime that you can force someone to come up, like that happens. Who was it? Who the Niners trade with to get from 12 to 3? Was it the Dolphins? Was it the Dolphins? I forget exactly who it was. It might have been the Dolphins. They went from 12 to 3 and they traded a bunch of first round picks. If you're drafting really high, you never know when someone gets desperate. When you're at pick 26, your best case scenario, it's like, yeah, we added a fourth to move back 7 slots, right? The Giants, who traded with the Texans, I think gave them like a third. You know, you had a pick in like the 80s or the 90s or the hundreds, whatever, to just get an extra. If I would have told Sean McVay and Les Snead that a couple months ago that you're going to end up with another team's first round pick to move back into the second round, they would never have believed you. They would have said, "John, put down the crack cocaine. Put down put down the vodka, homie. That is not realistic. That's never going to happen." And then it happens. And everyone's like doing a double take. You're like, "No, this can't be real. I don't believe this. This didn't just happen." And you're like, "No, it happened. They got a first round pick." So if the Rams end up with like people, my one pushback is everyone talks about Arch Manning like he's Peyton Manning. Let's see Arch play some real games. I'm not just trying to be a hater here, but let's pump the brakes. Let's just see the guy play before we just anoint him as the greatest thing since sliced bread. But if they do end up with whoever, Arch Manning or the top quarterback because of this pick, it'll go down as one of the great trades of all time. Okay, let's go enjoy the draft. I will have some reactions after round two, after round three. We'll combine those into a podcast for tomorrow, and we'll see, if anyone of substance, Kirk Cousins, would anyone even trade for Tyreek Hill? He's got a lot of shit going on. Jalen Ramsey makes a little too much money and doesn't show up to meetings on time. But I'm sure there Mark Andrews, Dallas Goedert. We got some other veteran names that are out there, so we'll have to keep an eye on some trades. But let's go enjoy the draft, and I will talk to everyone soon. Peace.